Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's webinar. For those of you who are new with us today, our principal software, MWF, which stands for Metal Wood Framer, is our automated Revit wall, floor, ceiling, and truss framing software for light gauge steel and also wood modeling. Today, our senior technician, Christina, will be walking us through how to output values such as profile type, length, quantity, and weight by using our reporting tools available within MWF, and also Everest, which is our standalone truss designer. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. At the end of the webinar, we'll be taking a few live questions. To be selected, please press the raise hand button on the control panel, but please also make sure that your computer audio is working correctly. If you'd prefer, you can also ask questions throughout the webinar in the questions tab of the GoToWebinar dashboard, and we'll make sure to get to them throughout the webinar or after the webinar. Sorry about that. All right, that's it from me. I'll hand off to Christina now.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. Hey, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. So for today, we're going to cover some of the reporting tools like Tanya mentioned. So we're going to get into one of the add-ins, and then on top of that, we'll also go ahead and look at something called member positioning to create wall reports, which will let you output to Excel. And to wrap that up, we'll take a look at some options in the trusses and then look at the report that you can generate with Everest as well. So let's start with the add-in. So as you guys can see here, I've got a pretty standard LinkedIn model in my Revit project. And there's an add-in that comes out of the box with the software. It's found in the add-ins tab here in Revit. And this is basically a nice little tool that you can use if you just want to get a pretty simple PDF report of everything that's clashing with your critical members. So I've got my infill studs turned on in this case. For anyone who's purely using this from a coordination perspective and wants to turn those off, there is the option here in the panel's properties. You can change that function and it'll just remove your infill and keep everything that's critical. But again, for today, I'm going to leave my infill turned on and we're going to go ahead and check for new clashes. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my rule set that I want to use. For any of you who are in the webinar 2 weeks back, I actually did cover how to set your rule sets up. But I'm going to go ahead and use all of my clashing options. And again, it's just going to use critical members to clash with. So any bearing options, bottom or top tracks, opening jambs, all those members are listed here. And I'm going to run the clash for all of these categories as well. So it can be specific, of course, you can pick what you want on and off the list. But let's leave this fairly generic. And as it calculates that, I also just want to point out that I'm not selecting anything. So no project or member selection required. It's just going to run it throughout the entire project. So once I let that run, you can see here I've got a list of all my panels, what level they're based on, what's penetrating through them, and which critical member is being clashed with. So I've got my entire list for that. There are options here on the top for filters. So if you do want to filter it by level, by the category, the type of object that's clashing, you do have these options over here to filter out if you do have quite a bit of clashes. And I'll also just point out that you can select the panel and you'll see my project change here in the background. So it's actually selecting the critical members that are clashing. And if I leave a panel selected, I can close out of here. And with Revit, you can put a quick little selection box around the selected object. And this will give you a nice isolated view of the clash as well. So a little handy option if you do want to narrow down and see live in the model what's going on. If anyone's unfamiliar with the Revit command, once selected, I just used the abbreviation BX, which just makes a selection box. Highly recommended. It's a nice little tool. So the main thing we're going to look at in here is what you can actually output from this table. So you'll notice here there's an export option. So I'm going to go ahead and just select all my different types of penetrants. I'm going to go ahead and say export selected. And this will actually let you print, or in this case, I'm going to print a PDF, but it'll let you print a basic list of all the panels and everything that's clashing against your critical members. So let's go ahead and just say OK. I'm going to go ahead and just export that. There we go. So now I'm just saving the PDF. And if I go take a look at that PDF that was created, you can see here, it's just going to show you the object that's clashing, and it'll highlight the critical members that it's clashing against. I've also got a little summary off the bottom here for the panel, the type of penetrant, and of course, the critical members that are clashing against it. There's also the options in here that I'll highlight, where you can put in comments if need be. And there's also resolution options to these clashes. So if you do want to ignore this or just mark it as resolved, you can always associate that with the clash. So any kind of customizing you do in that table will populate here on this PDF. And again, this is just for critical members, so it's not going to pop up if it's just clashing with my infill. It'll highlight the member and the clashing object. So let's close out of here. So again, it's just found here in the add-in, and it doesn't create any openings or frame any kind of openings like you'd find here in the interference tool. Again, just more purely for coordination, so you can see where those penetrants are in the first place. So next output that we're going to look at is found here in the outputs dropdown. And we're going to cover two options that we have here called positioning. And these guys here are basically counter tools that you can use to just count how many identical members you have in the project, how many identical panels you have. And then that's information that you can relay onto a wall report or a member report, and it'll just produce directly to Excel. So the first step with any of this is to run something called member positioning. So it's just going to count all of the members that are identical. So in my window over here, first thing I'll just point out, you can run this for walls and floors at the same time. It'll just produce the one report that you can access here through the wall module, but you do have the option to run both of them at the same time. And then these options here for the compares are again kind of filters that you can use to group your members together. So typically, family type and member length are all we're really going to need. But if you did want to group them again by the member level, by tag, or if they've been punched out or not, you do have that option that you can bring in here with these arrows. So you always have that option to customize the filters you want to use. So I'm going to stick with my pretty two simple compares, just using the type and the length. The next thing that we can make over here is just the name template, which is just the ID that you're going to give to your members. So the first thing, we can associate a position number. By default, it's set to 4 digits, so you can have 0001. But I'm going to bring this down just so we have the clean numbers. Just going to start at number 1. And then the position name template, you can leave the word position, or if you want, you can add your own abbreviation. It's just, again, another label that you're giving to the members. The next thing that you can do is if you want to put in the family type and the member length into that name template. And I'm just going to add some breaks in between them. So when we go ahead and show the table, it'll just break them into nice clean columns. And for that, just shift / with the keyboard and you'll get your breaks. So I'm going to go ahead and let the positioning run. And again, I'm just going to highlight with a lot of these reports, you don't have to have anything selected. So without anything selected, it'll do it project-wide. If you do want to break it up, make different reports per level maybe, you can just go to a floor plan, select all the panels on one particular floor, and then run the same steps. So if you did want to break up your reports that way, you could always run it by selection. So now that we've got this all set up, you can see here, this is just my different naming that it's associated. So it's just taking my prefix, I've got my family type, the length, and then it's just gone and grouped everything together by those 2 compares. So this is something we'll be able to populate onto a member report later on. But I'll also just highlight if you want to quickly just copy everything and copy paste onto another document, you can just select everything in the top left corner. The other thing I'm also just going to point out, you can always use Revit schedules as well to get these kind of global takeoffs, but these reporting tools are just a nice little option. If you don't want to have to bother setting up Revit schedules, use those parameters. There's really not much setup to do, and you can get a quick count. So now that everything is set up, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And next we can go ahead and run the panel positioning. So this was just counting the members. Now we're going to actually go ahead and run the positioning to see how many identical panels we have. So same options, I can run it for both walls and floors. And again, the compares, you can use panel dimensions, the panel host, so just the wall type that it's in, the members. If you want to separate it by the template data, so the templates that you have set up in your walls. And of course, if there's any kind of openings. So with the wall compares, I usually like to put a bit more filters on there. You could put in levels as well. But for the most part, the dimensions, the host, the members, and the openings are all the filters that I really need to break up my wall panels. I'm also going to go ahead and drop my digit count. And same idea as the members, you can give some kind of naming template to name out all your identical panels. So I'm just going to go ahead and let this run as well. And like the member positioning, it's just going to run through all my panels and group them together. So you've got a similar option. You can show a table. And all this is really going to do is show you the panels. And then again, just give you an estimated count. I've got some pretty unique panels, but we do have a few repetitive ones. And let's go ahead and save those. So before I go ahead and run the reports, I just want to highlight that the positioning and these parameters that get placed, those IDs, are always something that you can actually pull and use separately in a Revit schedule, or just pull out the parameter. I've got my position name here on my members. So you'll notice if you click, let's find maybe a shorter stud, that the positioning name is going to change. So this is always a parameter you can pull into a Revit schedule if you wanted to. And the other one that you can pull is that positioning ID for the panels. So besides the regular naming template that we have for the panels, if I go to my project panel names, you can see here that there's an option for positioning. So if you did want to give all identical panels one unique ID, the positioning is an easy way to do that. I can go ahead and pick positioning only. And then it's just going to run through my project. And it'll just rename all my panels and use that position ID. So it is a nice little tool if you want to group your panels together under one ID. It renames the panel with that position ID. So you could always pull that into a Revit schedule if you wanted to as well. So once the positioning is done, what you can do is always generate these reports. So if I start off with a member report, let's go ahead and generate that. You could always change the length units. You can change the precisions. But when it's all said and done, you'll get a nice little Excel list with the profile. It'll give you a designation if it's a track or column, the length, just that positioning label, so that parameter that's stamped onto our member, and an overall quantity. So this is the member report that you could always produce. Again, it's just grouping everything by the member type, by the profile. But if you did want to group things together by panel, you can always generate a wall report. So again, it's just going to output an Excel file with a breakdown of all my wall panels. So it'll use the panel name, regardless if you want to use the position ID or just the regular unique panel naming. It'll pick whichever one you have on your panels. But it'll give you a good member breakdown, the profile, which level it's on. And what's nice with this as well is that it gives you the weight estimate per member and then for your panel in general. So as long as you've got the weights on your families, which the weights are all built into our steel studs, so shouldn't be any issues there. You'll get the overall breakdown for every single panel. So again, those are the two reports that you can generate with the positioning. So if you want to save yourself the hassle of creating a Revit schedule, you could always do a quick output to Excel. You can see it really didn't take much time to set up at all, and you're good to go. So the next one I'm going to look at actually has to do with trusses. And we'll look at the first one here in the bill of material report in regular MWF, and then we'll switch gears and look at the engineering reports in Everest. So I'll just highlight that there is another bill of material report that you can do for the trusses. This is available in all the products, regardless if there's metal, wood, if there's engineering or no engineering options. I can go ahead and run the bill of material report. Just save that to my desktop. Select my truss. There are two labeling options that you can use, but I'll just go ahead and pick a schedule label. I'll just highlight that the two options that you can use are built in to the families already. There's a generic labeling or the actual label option just uses the nodes. So this can just be web between node 8 and 9. If any of you have used trusses at all, you'll know what that means. So this is just going to be, again, an Excel report for the trusses. It'll give you the truss naming. If there are a duplicate number of instances, it'll give you the total, a breakdown of all the different members, the material, the family, the lengths, overall quantity, and again, it'll give you the weights. So it'll give you the weight per truss, and then if there are, again, duplicates, it'll just group that together under one weight. So that is an option for the trusses that's available regardless which product you guys are on. But for anyone who's on advanced metal, we do have some basically engineering and fabrication reports that you can generate. And I thought I'd generate them today in another product that we have called Everest. So for anyone who's used advanced metal or who's seen the engineering a little bit, this is basically just a standalone product of our truss designer. So I'm not in Revit anymore, completely different environment. It's basically just its own software to be able to generate those reports. So once these presets are set up, all my different engineering options, my loading, my deflection, all that's good to go. There's 3 basic reports that you can produce with this. There's a fabrication drawing, and an engineering, and a detailed engineering drawing. So basically, I can go ahead and analyze my truss through here. In this case, I do have it that it's passing. But regardless if it's passing or if there's a failure, you can go ahead and generate these reports. And the first one, like I mentioned, it's just going to be a fabrication report. It'll give you a member breakdown. And with the engineering, you also do get an estimated screw count. So it'll give you an estimated amount that you'll need at each connection. So this can basically replace any kind of shop drawings that we'd otherwise have for the trusses. And then the other 2 reports that we have as well is the engineering report. So this will just give you, again, a good summary. You'll see the CSI limits, any kind of deflections. And then it'll just give you a load summary of what's been applied to your trusses. And a member forces summary as well. Just the CSI, the axial force, the compression force. And it'll just tabulate that on one page, so you can give it an overview. But if maybe your truss is failing and you want a bit more detail as to why, you could always go into the detailed engineering drawing. So we have all the same options. Only difference now is it'll go over each individual reaction. So the reactions at each individual point and the loading that's being applied. So all my different loading options, the categories, and the magnitudes. And all the different load combinations that are considered. So again, I'll just reiterate, we have this exact same option built into regular MWF if you do want to model out these trusses afterwards. This is just a standalone product of the Truss Designer. So that'll be it for me today. So if there's any questions, please feel free.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. As she mentioned, we have time to answer a few questions. If you'd like to pose a question live, please raise your hand now by clicking on the hand icon in the control panel. Just please make sure that your audio is working correctly as well. While we wait for any questions to come through, I'd just like to remind everyone that the recording of the webinar will be sent through shortly after the session is closed. As always, please feel free to share the recording with any colleagues. And if you'd like to set up a one-on-one demo, we highly encourage you to reach out to our team after the session has ended. Our technicians will be able to walk you through how you build and how MWF modules, as well as our extensions, can benefit your next project. So we'll just give it a few more seconds. All right, it looks like we have a question from Colum. Colum, I'm just going to unmute you right now. All right, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, Colm, I can hear you.
Hey, I just had a quick question. Is it possible to design trusses but have a limit on the maximum number of screws per connection?
The limit is not something that's built in right now. It's just going to depend on the screw category. So in short, no, but again, it is just kind of an estimate. So it is up to the user at the end of the day to kind of know if there's enough surface area for the number of screws that we estimated.
Yeah.
But it is just an estimate. But we did do some updates to our screw count recently, so you should find that it's a bit more accurate and you'll have less screws per connection.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Perfect. And Christina, we have another question from Mamadou. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you right now. All right, go ahead.
Hello. In the first world reports, you have in the Excel file, you have C for columns and T for tracks.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when we frame our panels, we also put some horizontals. For example, to limit, to fix the sheathing, we have horizontals at 4 feet from the bottom, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, if they have horizontals, they come as tracks, or they have a different type of label designation.
So when you do have horizontals, this is meant to really just say if it's a column or a horizontal member. You can always change the designation, but let me get back to you on that, because I do believe there is a way that we can change what the designation comes in at. So if you want, I'll send you an email once this is over. I'll double check something and I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds to see if there's any last minute questions. All right, I think that about wraps it up for today. Once again, thank you, Christina, and thank you to everyone who registered for the webinar. Just want to mention quickly to stay tuned. We'll be having a webinar every Wednesday for the next few weeks. Next week's we'll cover our coordination tools within MWF. All right, we'll now be ending the webinar. Thank you.